Today we end the torment. 20 books, 12 games, 10 whole years, all leading to this moment. The ultimate FNaF timeline is finally complete. The pieces are in place for us. Now all we have to do is put the story of tragedy, jealousy, and loss together. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's finally time for my FNaF timeline. I've been working on this for 6 whole months, but I'll explain more at the end. So, without wasting any more of you guys' time, I present to you the story of a loving, obsessive father who slowly descended into madness and along the way discovered the secret of eternal life. Our story begins not in the 1980s or even the 1970s, but all the way back in the 1930s. It was the throes of the Great Depression, and people were in desperate need of cheap entertainment, especially in Utah. One of the states hit hardest, fourth highest unemployment in the nation, and full of transient people looking for work in Salt Lake, finding none, and ultimately moving on to find their fortunes out in California. People were tired and were hungry. But as they traveled, there was one thing that could lift their spirits. A simple roadside attraction called Fredbear's Singing Show. The ads were plastered all over town, featuring an animated bear drawn in a popular pie-eyed cartoon style for characters at the time. He resembled cartoons like Mickey Mouse, Felix the Cat, Betty Boop, and immediately said that this Fredbear's was a place that you could bring the family, and the price couldn't be beat. For 50 cents, you can get food and entertainment as you watch the local trained real-life dancing bear perform on stage. Normally, you got to see the dancing bears at large traveling circuses like Barnum or Bailey, where tickets would go for about $1, and that's $1 without food. But this was a smaller show like the type from the Von Brothers or the Barabin Brothers, where tickets would sell for just a mere 50 cents. Watching that bear do tricks on stage without a glimmer of joy at a time when so much was working with the world. This simple show would go on for years, bringing happiness to hundreds of travelers passing through looking for a quick meal, but it left a permanent impression on one little boy, capturing his imagination in a way that nothing else had. One little boy named Billy. Well, that was his nickname, at least. But his parents called him William Afton. The bear could dance, it could sing. For decades, William dreamed for recreating that moment of a musical bear to life. But how? William was smart, no doubt, without a doubt, and he had a keen mind for business, but wasn't the most creative. How do you make a singing, dancing bear come to life? The best he could do was using rudimentary performers wearing the suits to use their material arms and hands to interact with the guest, as opposed to the older models where the arms would just hang limply by their sides. Finally, with a simple mascot suit, he would be able to realize his childhood dream. he would be able to bring Fredbear to life to appeal to the kids, and for copyright reasons, he changed Fredbear into a realistic brown animal to a cartoonish yellow bear with a purple hat and bow tie. But the feeling like one character wasn't enough. He added another friend, a yellow rabbit with a purple vest and a matching tie named Bonnie the Bunny. While Fredbear was certainly his first love, Bonnie was extra special because because this was his. It was an original character that he created from scratch. And I do mean scratch. William's hand-sewn costumes were rough at the seams and stitches visibly showing. But it was the best that he could do. And you know what? It was just enough. Bonnie and Fredbear would perform on stage to small but enthusiastic crowds. Finally, he was able to deliver fantasy and fun to all the kids, delighting and inspiring them in the exact way that he had been delighted and inspired so many years ago. And things could have ended there. That could have been the end of his story. It could have been perfect, had it not been for one thing. Other people saw the success of his idea a way they wanted in. Enter Chica's Party World, a rival restaurant starring performing animal bears. His idea is, except they did it better. William may have been the first, but obviously he wasn't the best. It hurt the prideful William Afton to admit it. But this restaurant was able to do the thing he always wanted to do. Make the animals actually come to life. All the performers in this restaurant were robots. Simple metal skeletons that were powered by battery packs. But all of them able to freely turn and talk and dance on their own. No human required. It was like magic. Magic that came from the mind of a brilliant creator named Henry Emily. This Henry had some small way. He had magic. He had been able to harness the power to life itself. William admired him. He was jealous, to be sure, but he was also looked upon this man with awe. Off to one side of Chica's Party World was a small cabaret stage featuring an elephant magician. On the other, hippo, made known to ramble on and on. That one was more of a joke for the parents. But it was the main stage that was for the kids, a rocking band featuring a yellow chicken with a southern drawl named Chica, backed by a band of other country-themed characters, including a pig with a banjo and an upbeat frog from the local swimming hole, and a brown bear with a heavy southern accent. Wait, a bear? But bears were his animals. Why not a cow or a horse? Something to fit the country theme a bit better. Why did he have to be a bear? Adding insult to injury, they had the nerve to call this thing Ned Bear, a direct copy from his own Fredbear. No, that was not okay. Afton's jealous admiration turned to hardened bitterness. A bitterness that would only grow over the next couple of years as families continued to choose Chica's Party World over Fredbear's. William just couldn't compete with the appeal of the robots. Eventually, his restaurant would go bankrupt, only to be bailed out by, of course, Henry Emily. Another insult. Another humiliation that William wouldn't soon forget. 1979, despite being bitter, Afton couldn't deny that what came next was a period of massive success and expansion. With two franchises now merged into one, it was the best for both worlds. Afton's ideas with with Henry's robotic expertise, the two men decided to launch a new name, Fredbear's Family Diner, a pizza chain that would eventually come to feature a mix of humans and performing suits as well as on-stage animatronics. They decided to stick with Fredbear as the headliner, considering the yellow bear was easily identifiable as the brand as a brand because he was the original performing animal mascot. William appreciated that. This restaurant would also see the mix of characters as two franchises merged into one, with Pick Patch and Happy Frog performing right alongside Fredbear and Bonnie. At this part of as part of this one big Fredbear family, they got themselves official merch that released, wrangling on from masks to magnets. That said, not all characters were winners. The reception to some characters was just mediocre. So they faded out into the dumpster storage units and retro budget tech stores of lost nostalgia, waiting for their chance to step back into the limelight if when a headliner went out of commission. Otherwise, though, would fare much better. Like like a new Pirate Fox, as well as a blue guitar playing variant of the Yellow Bonnie Bunny. Ultimately, the franchise would get so big it spawned its own cartoon show, Fredbear's Family Diner. Business was booming. In the end, Fredbear and Bonnie's popularity would be so strong they would be able to support their friends. In 1980, 1930, 19, I can't read the freaking 1983, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza launched, giving a dedicated home to all this new supporting cast of characters. Chica the Chicken, Bonnie the Blue Bunny, Foxy the Pirate, and of course the headliner, a brown Freddy Fazbear. Business was good and Afton was happy. Mostly. It did bother him that one original character that he created, the one that he himself played, Golden Bonnie, got passed over for inclusion in the cartoon show. The only character in the roster of regulars to get ignored for the show. But other than that, things were going smoothly. He had himself a wife, 2 sons, a daughter. He had a thriving business. Best of all, he was able to learn the craft of robotics from a man that he both loved and hated, Henry. Together, they were constantly pushing the limits of what these characters could do because it was quick and easy. New characters introduced into the roster would be given a simple hand-sewn suit with 5 fingers that any performer could wear. Eventually, Henry would design one of himself, design one of his signature animatronics for the character, utilizing a divided mouth with either a hinge or a sliding jaw design. This was the first generation of animatronics. But why stop there? Afton had big ideas. If the animatronics weren't just locked into the stage, but could roam. What if the animatronics weren't just locked to the stage, but could freely roam the restaurant and interact with the kids? What if his mascot suits could become animatronics? What if you could use more than just rigid and metallic skeletons? Why not experiment with tubes and wires that could give the animatronics fluidity and flexibility, while still providing structure? The possibilities for this technology were endless. Afton fell in love with robotics. He had started with a dream of bringing one simple singing bear to life, but with robots, he had stumbled across the tools that gave him the ability of control life itself. And thanks to Henry, he was practically speedrunning this thing. his way to engineering degree. And while William wouldn't admit out loud, one other thing that kept him pushing forward was the desire to beat his own former rival, to prove himself smarter and more capable, to surpass the man who everyone else considered to be a visionary genius. But pride cometh before the fall, and tragedy was about to strike. 1983. Business was booming with two whole restaurant franchises running, Fredbear's Family Diner and the newly opened Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Together, William and Henry had been able to take the hybrid suit idea and make it into a reality. They called their new invention the Springlock suit, and fittingly enough, it was symbolic of the partnership between these two men. A human suit as designed by William that could become a freestanding Henry-style animatronic. Animatronic. No, robot. It's a robot. Sorry. But because it was still new tech with kinks to work out, the rollout was limited, restricted only to Fredbear's Family Diner locations. All this meant that William was busier than ever. He didn't have time to be a full-time parent, so he designed a nanny cam system where cameras and speakers were hidden throughout the neighborhood, as well as in his youngest son's favorite toy, Second Fredbear. Plushie Fredbear. Sorry. But since his cameras weren't enough to raise a kid, he also left child care duties to his eldest son, Michael. There was just one problem with that. Michael was far from the best babysitter. He tormented his younger brother by jump-scaring him with a foxy mask and constantly left him behind. William watched all of this on his cameras. Kids be kids. Tomorrow was another day, after all. Michael's torment didn't stop. Bitter, angry thoughts would run through Michael's mind. Why did he have to be the one to take care of this whining crybaby all the time? It just wasn't fair. It was time that he got even his brother by playing a ultimate prank. A prank that just so happened to be on his crying child's birthday. He and his friends would take his scared little brother and make him do the one thing that he was terrified of doing, getting close to the animatronics. This would be embarrassing for the kid. That's such an embarrassment to him. His brother screamed, kicked, and fought. But just as they were putting the small, squirming boy up to Fredbear's lips, the mouth snapped shut. The sensitive spring locks inside the body had been triggered by the boy's movements, and they immediately clamped down. The ringly stopped. The boy went limp. It was just a prank. It was meant to be funny. The boy was taken to the hospital and was immediately given an IV, flowers, and pills. The nightstand filled the nightstand next to his hospital bed. But the damage was too severe. He couldn't recover. As the young brother's consciousness began to fade, he hears Michael's last words. A small and flimsy apology. But his father, Williams, through the voice of the Fredbear plush, were a firm and committed promise to a dying son. You're broken. I will put you back together. This would not be the end, no matter what. William's son would live again. It would just take time. Time that right now he just didn't have. His young son's heart flattened as the boy faded into the inky unknown of the afterlife. In the aftermath of the tragedy, changes started happening around the restaurant. Kids were now required to wear security wristbands to prevent anyone from getting outside without parental permission. Any kid who approached the exit without permission would have to answer to the security puppet, a marionette on strings that could fly around on rails across the restaurant to stop kids in their tracks. It was William's idea, inspired by Michael constantly leaving the restaurant without his brother. In the wake of Fredbear's Springlock failure, all the hybrid suits were getting retired, locked away at the nearby Freddy Fazbear location. It was yet another tough pill to swallow. After all the hard work that he and Henry had put into them, William would eventually bury the boy's small body in a remote location out in the woods, right alongside his drive into and out of work every day. The death of this little boy sent the family spiraling. His wife, crippled with grief, was so distraught that all she could do was sit and watch TV. But his son, Michael, was far worse, complaining of seeing hallucinations of a golden bear standing outside his window. The boy was so racked with guilt that he was convinced that he was being haunted by the ghost of his brother, stuck inside the suit that took his life. The suit's three-toed feet digging into the wet earth. The words "It's me" ringing in through Michael's ears. Some nights Michael would even go so far as to break out of his room to check the gravesite and ensure that his brother was still there. As for William himself, he disappeared into his work and his drinks. Junior's, the local bar, wasn't far from his son's grave. He found himself going there more and more frequently, spending longer and longer amounts of time there. The bar gave him a place to think, to remember, to reflect and stew on how Henry had stolen his ideas for an animal-themed restaurant, and how he cut his character out of the cartoon when everyone else was there. Now Henry had humiliated him and by buying him out of bankruptcy, and now there was a son. Henry had taken his son from him. The robotic parts was the part of that failed after all. Now, William ordered one more drink, but it was one too many. The bar turned him out and told him to go home. But William didn't go home. Drunk and angry, William raced back to the restaurant, to give Henry a piece of his mind, only to find someone else waiting. Henry's daughter, Charlie, locked outside of the building, bullies laughing at her, only to find... I keep doing that. Bullies laughing at her through the window. Fine. Some other problem to fix. But then, Afton got an idea. A beautifully awful idea. This was his chance to get back at the man that he humiliated all those years ago. Henry had killed his business. And now Henry's robotic suit had killed his son. It was time for William to do some killing of his own. Left Henry feel what it's like to have something you love get ripped away. While parties continued inside the walls of the pizzeria, William attacked Charlie in the alleyway, and it felt good. He felt free. The years of resentment and bitterness trapped in his heart finally released in a moment of pure, unapologetic evil. He would make Henry hurt like he hurt. In that moment, William became a killer. He dropped Charlie's lifeless body into and drove home, forced to confront his family's problems later that night. Appalled, but also a little excited by what he just done. Charlie's death would remain in the books as a random act of violence, and though Henry had suspicions about William, there was no physical evidence. Nothing that could link him back to the crime. In the weeks that followed, Fredbear's family diner would close for good. Two high-profile deaths around the restaurant with two grieving owners in such a short period of time. This was just too much bad pressure to handle. Besides, Freddy Fazbear's was still open and was newer restaurant anyways. All the equipment about the diner, including the old yellow suits and security puppet, would go get retired into that location. There they would sit for 2 uneventful years. And the rest of 1983 and 1984 were spent quietly grieving. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the new cast of characters were a hit. The tragic memories of the yellow predecessors quickly faded. Afton kept a low profile and buried himself into work and research, eventually quickly reaching Henry's level of engineering and even surpassing him. And while Henry slowed down to grieve, Afton kept going, even starting his own company, Afton Robotics, for all those pet projects that were a bit too experimental for the operations of the pizzeria. The first of these experimental projects was a secret workshop under his house, a veritable bunker, which allowed him to work while still monitoring his kids via hidden security cameras. 1983, the passcode that served as a constant reminder of why the cameras were so important, why he was down there in the first place. This was all to fulfill the promise that he made to his son, right? I will put you back together. This was for him. All for him, right? But cameras weren't enough. He needed to solve the runaway Michael problem. He had to keep him in the house. He couldn't have one of his kids wind up dead inside of an animatronic suit. Another one, actually. So why not run a little experiment on Michael? You see, all this work had Henry had gotten Afton to start learning about life, robots, the human mind, what a fallible machine we as humans were. Our reality is so easy to manipulate with as few few sensory deceptions. Deceptions like sound. With just a few sounds, he discovered that he could alter the person's vision. He could transform blank, smooth plastic robots into lumbering, twisted nightmares. Nightmares far scarier that he could create actual materials. They would appear organic, rotting, putrid, terrifying. These would be his means of keeping his son Michael at the house where he belonged. Was it extreme? Maybe. But then again, this was the boy who killed his son. so he would make him sorry. And so Michael would grow up not to dealing with the memories of his own guilt, the hospital room, the pills, the flowers, the death of his brother, but also facing literal nightmares, illusions created by sound. Michael would never forget these either. Years later, as a security guard, he would still draw pictures of them inside his logbook. But all the extra projects meant that his house suffered even more. With an absent, he was an absent father and a non-existent husband, leaving his wife cold and alone. And despite her repeated demands that he leave his office and engage with his family, he refused time and time again, leaving her no choice but to leave. Through it all, there's one lingering feeling. William wasn't done. He had gotten the taste of what it felt to be unleashed, what it felt like to be free. Charlie's murder had unlocked something in him. He wanted more. June 26th, 1985. Putting on the Golden Bonnie suit, he lured children one by one to the back room of the pizzeria when no one was looking. At first, he was cautious. He would lure them with promises of cake and cookies. He told them that their dog had died. He would ask for help with homework. Susie was the first. You never truly forget your first. But where to hide the bodies? He couldn't sneak out. Someone would see him. He had to find them had to hide them in a place where they'd never be found and where they'd never leave the building. They had to be stuffed into the suits. No one be able, no ever, no ever, no never. Wait, no, fuck. No one maintained those things anyway. Maintained those things anyway. I'm sorry, except for him. And so Susie would go into Chica, Fritz, Jeremy, and Gabriel would come next. It was easy. It was too easy. With each little life he snuffed out, his lives got bigger. Their house was burning down. They were just being kidnapped until the last one, where the pretense was off. He let himself get violent, too violent. The body of Cassidy was far more bloody and broken back than the others. He let himself go too far. That's one he shouldn't have killed. With more active animatronics left, he shoved the body into one suit that remained backstage. The long forgotten Fredbear, now broken and discolored with age. Broken like Cassidy was broken, like his son was broken. Newspapers reported on this disappearance, naming the whole thing the missing children's incident. Police would even charge William with the crimes after finding security footage of the male mascot luring to the back, but they couldn't convict him. There were no bodies in his face, and his face had been hidden beside the mascot suit the entire time. What they had was circumstantial at best. So he walked away a free man. But Henry knew the truth. In these murders, he saw his daughter, Charlie, all over again. So he threw Afton out of the company and shuttered the doors to the old pizzeria. Henry would keep the franchise quiet for 2 years. This would not happen again. This could not happen again. How could he protect the children? Finally, he developed a solution. He would implement an even more extreme security system in the form of new animatronics, toy animatronics, inspired by the toys they had been selling years ago. By these guys, these were special. They were a new breed of robot with facial recognition abilities. All the other original animatronics, now withered with age, were moved to the new location. With a plan in place, it was time to try once more. The year was 1987, and the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was making the headlines in local newspapers. Headlines that just so happened to catch the attention of William Afton. Freddy's was back, and without him, that was his idea, his character. Henry was, yet again, trying to cut him out of the picture. No, as long as these restaurants stayed open, William would always come back. Then he noticed the phone number to apply at the bottom of the article. $100 a week to apply a call. Afton would go back. As not an owner or co-founder, he would go back in the one place that they would least suspect him. A lowly day shift security guard. And there was buried in the back of parts and service mixed with the old withered animatronics was the golden rabbit with the yellow security badge still on its chest. He used his crank to open the spring locks, and it was time for Bonnie to give an encore performance. 1987, 5 more kids. He didn't know what felt better, getting back into the suit after 2 long years of waiting, or knowing his devastating this would be to William in the next morning. He didn't even try to hide his crime anymore this time. Just meant more blood in Henry's hands. He failed to protect the kids again. The restaurant he had... Oh no. The restaurant had only been open for a few weeks, but William was sure that this would get too close. Get it too close. What good? If he couldn't have Freddy's, no one would. Whenever a new pizzeria opened, he would be there. But as he sat in his bunker, something else started to linger in William's mind. He had seen something strange. The old Wither animatronics. They had been wandering around the building, spurred on by the puppets. It was almost like those robots were trying to save the kids. Save them? They couldn't, obviously. But still, how were they moving? It was almost like they had been given life somehow. But did he have something to do with that? The following day, the news had reported a security guard getting bitten by one of the animatronics during the day shift. Was that bite meant for him? William's curiosity was stronger than his bloodlust. God, I can't read. He had to learn more. But how? This was way more he'd ever be able to get inside another Freddy's Pizzeria. Heck, there was practically no way a Freddy's would ever open again. He needed to create something new, something brand new. He needed to create his own pizzeria, Circus Baby's Pizza World, and this would be the place where he could continue his work. No longer just murdering experiments. No longer just murdering and experimenting. He needed more kids, and he needed them alive. And knowing that he couldn't show his face in the restaurant floor, he needed a way of remotely capturing his victims and preserving them of his work. With that goal in mind, he designed a brand new breed of animatronics. Their endoskeletons, fluid, flexible. He equipped them with soundlers that could mimic voices. They could isolate children. Encapsulate, incapitate, and contain them with zero direct input from him. It was brilliant. He was brilliant. Far beyond the simple bars and wires of Henry's designs, and the characters he chose for this were uniquely his. His new roster wasn't going to be tainted by Henry's disgusting barnyard bird. Instead, it was back to his characters, his creations, Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, as well as two special ones. First, Ballora was a homage to the woman who had left him. Now she would never leave him again. The second was the titular, this baby, was designed with his baby in mind, Elizabeth, his youngest child. He would always be Daddy's little girl. God, why did I say that? With the one that listened to him, the one that obeyed, until the day she didn't. The day before Circus Bay's Pizza World opened, she disobeyed. She didn't listen. Left alone with baby, she got too close. The animatronic ripped in half and swallowed her whole. A scared and confused child faded into eternal darkness. By the time Afton found her, it was too late. She was gone. He immediately canceled the launch of Circus Baby. He immediately canceled the launch of Circus Babies under the gives, I don't know how to say that, of a gas leak. But wait, as he sat there at the foot of the stage, he noticed there was something different. The eye color of the robot had changed. Baby had been built with blue eyes, but now they were emerald green, the same color as Elizabeth. Was she in there? Could this all be connected? Of the three moving animatronics that would be seen at Freddy's? He had to know more. His morning turned into excitement. He had returned to where it all had started. 1993. Pathetic. This place was pathetic. Henry had clearly trying to reopen one final time with these old original animatronics from so long ago, but William's damage to the brand had been permanent. These things stink of death. They hadn't been washed in decades. But even if they had, nothing could wash away the stink of murder that haunted these halls. One night, then another, William repeatedly snuck into the old broken restaurant to lure the living animatronics to him, one by one, dismantling them, robbing them of their endoskeletons. The metal had to be the secret. That it had to contain the remnants of life itself. But he had to know for sure. And that's where I'm going to leave it there, because this franchise is incredibly long. So I'm going to leave it here for now, and then continue later today. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys for part 2. Bye.